Good morning, friends. I'm your host, Jonathan Trotter. Welcome back to the Digging in the Dirt podcast. It is a beautiful 11 a.m. in the middle part of the United States right now, and I'm so excited to get to spend some time with you again and talk about grief and loss. It's just the next chapter in Digging in the Dirt, so I thought we would just jump in to the next chapter of Digging in the Dirt. So glad that you're here. This is a topic that I end up talking about quite a bit with people because it is such a human experience. Walking through grief and loss, having walked through grief and loss and now processing it, or anticipating grief and loss, and how do we do that well, or should we even do that at all? So, though I'm not really excited to talk about it, I am kind of excited because it's just so prescient for us and so poignant and important for us to get to because we're all walking through it, or we have, or we're about to um, on this side of heaven. So, why don't we jump into this chapter called Grief in my book, Digging in the Dirt, and we'll see where we go. Okay, here goes. Grief, an empty ocean, and the 10 things we must remember about grief. Pinned during the pandemic. Walking alone at a park, a friend of mine saw a woman busily walking towards her, dictating something into her phone. The woman looked earnest and concentrated. She came closer and closer, and as her words became more distinct, my socially distancing friend heard these slow, simple words. Sadness is an ocean with nothing in it, period. Oh, how I want to know that woman's story. I recently Googled those words and came up empty. Apparently, she hasn't published them yet. In any case, I'm guessing you resonate with her sentiment. These are hard times, and the future is murky. My guess is that at some point over the past several months, you could have written, Sadness is an ocean with nothing in it, period. Or perhaps you would agree with Jaber Crow, Wendell famous barber of Port William, who said one bone soaked evening, it had been raining, and it was still raining. It was going to rain. It feels like that to me sometimes. It had been raining. It was still raining. It was going to rain. So let me push pause here for just a second and say, yeah, this was written during the pandemic, but I utilize these 10 things with clients all the time, whether that's international folks who are dealing with grief and loss that is sometimes specific to international living and ministry, or folks who are just trying to get by here in the middle part of the United States and have lost parents or loved ones or jobs. So although this was pinned during the pandemic, I still utilize these ideas all the time. Okay, back to the book, page 85. And so I offer you this list of 10 things to remember about grief. I hope that you find something helpful here. And whatever you're grieving, whether it's a job, a family member, or the future you had planned, know that it matters. In each case, loss singes and grieving matters. So, shall we? Number one, grief is a process. It is messy, unpredictable, and gnarly. But whatever else it is, grief is also a process. That means it is not its own ending. It's going somewhere, leading to something. Author and theologian Dan Allender does not mince words when he writes, grief is similar to vomiting. At its deepest convulsion, it exhausts, nauseates, and relieves. It empties us, weakens us, and prepares us for food that in due season will strengthen us. But in its immediate aftermath, we need rest. Number two, grief might not feel like grief. It might feel like discomfort or generalized sluggishness or even anxiety. Grief expert David Kessler describes the situation with COVID. He writes, we're feeling a number of different griefs. We feel the world has changed, and it has. We know this is temporary, but it doesn't feel that way. And we realize things will be different. Just as going to the airport is forever different from how it was before 9/11, Things will change, and this is the point at which they changed. The loss of normalcy, the fear of economic toll, the loss of connection, this is hitting us and we're grieving collectively. We are not used to this kind of collective grief in the air. Number 3, you don't have to be sad all day to effectively grieve. Therapist Kay Bruner recommends the evidence-based time limit of 20 minutes. She writes, "This is a research-based number. Journal 20 minutes per day when you're working on a specific issue. I recently had a client tell me how much the 20-minute exercise has helped. She's not stuffing down her emotions anymore, and the 20-minute limit helps her contain the feelings so they aren't as overwhelming." So let me push pause there. Excuse me. I mention this to clients all of the time because sometimes people think, well, if I'm going to grieve, what do I have to do? Do I have to lay in bed for 2 weeks? I mean, that would be more like a clinical depression. And if we're not able to do our daily living, that's a good time to reach out for some professional help. But when it comes to, not having to grieve all day to effectively grieve, people often find it a relief to hear that it is possible to do your regular life and then to say, you know what, I feel like I need to process some stuff. I need to grieve some stuff. So maybe I set aside 10, 20 minutes a day, sit down with a journal or go for a walk and just give yourself space to feel whatever it is that you need to feel. Maybe grief will bubble up and maybe you'll feel really sad, but maybe you won't. Maybe you'll just write out where you're at that day, or you're just giving the soul some space to feel what it needs to feel. So I do recommend it. But then also at the end of that 20 minutes, maybe you set a timer and say, at the end of this 20 minutes, when that beeper goes off, I'm going to get up. I'm going to go do something different. I'm going to go get a drink or go hug my kids or call a friend or something to kind of mark the end of that 20-minute, knowing that you can actually take that grief, sort of wrap it up, put it on the shelf. It'll still be there. It'll hold. And then the next time you have some time, maybe it's tomorrow or a few days from now, you can pick that grief up off the shelf, unwrap it again, give it some space to air out, knowing that you don't have to be overwhelmed by it. You don't have to sit with it forever or until it just runs its course. You can sort of take some agency, take some ownership of it, and work it that way. So sometimes that's an important thing for people to note. Okay, back to the book. Oh, this is one of my favorite ones. Number 4, the dual process model allows for oscillations. It is pretty normal to bounce back and forth between I'm okay and I'm not okay and I'll never be okay. And why would you even think I'm okay? Researchers Strobe and Shute describe this as the dual process model of coping with bereavement. It is totally normal to oscillate between a loss-oriented world and a restoration-oriented world. In fact, getting stuck on either side might be an indicator to get some outside help from a pastor or a counselor. Okay, let me pause for a second, just say a little bit more about this dual process model. I often have clients ponder what is it in their life that they're doing that's on the restoration side. So that's new things, new relationships, opening themselves up to living. And then what are the things that they're doing on the loss-oriented side? That's maybe grieving or the journaling or crying or listening to the music that sort of connects with their soul. And recognize that actually bouncing back and forth between those two things is really helpful, especially in the early stages. And that's not crazy. You're not crazy if one day you're feeling this, and then the next day or the next hour, you're back over here. And I would just say, and I often tell clients, my mother passed away years and years ago when I was 17 years old. So I'm not in the loss-oriented side of that experience very often. I'm in the living forward and living through that. However, there are still times, even all these kind of decades later, when I do sort of bounce back to that loss-oriented side, and I need to give myself some space to grieve the fact that she's still not here and that I still don't have my mom. And recognizing that oscillation is actually fairly normal is really important. And it's very helpful for me. So I hope that you could give yourself the grace to do that while also acknowledging that getting stuck on either side, where you're only forward thinking, you're only looking at what's coming next, um, could be used to avoid the loss oriented or the grieving side, or what looks like the grieving side. But then also, if you're getting stuck in the loss oriented side for weeks and weeks and weeks and never bouncing to getting up, taking the shower, all right, that's an indicator that we might need some extra help, at least something to think about. So that's the dual process model. All right, back to the book. Number 5. Excuse me. People grieve differently, even if they're in the same family. So some people grieve in giant waves, some don't. Some people show all their grief, some don't. Some people are vocal and some aren't. Some extroverts want the crowds to know all about it, and some introverts don't. The danger here is that you expect others to grieve the right way or your way, and instead of allowing them their own grief process, you try to stuff them into your box. That can leave them feeling resentful, detached, and seeking solace far away from you. Excuse me. Number 6, even if the loss looks the same, it isn't. It's just not. So the loss I experienced when my dad died was terrible, but it was also very different from the loss experienced by my younger siblings. The hubris that says my experience of loss is the gold standard by which all others shall be measured is antithetical to the heart of Christ. Number 7, things will never be the same again. This is an indelible part of our story now, and the grief of this season will bleed through the pages of our lives, marking the pages in the stories that follow. Failing to acknowledge the COVID chapters is to censor, to edit out, to delete plot twists and main characters, to murder history. So we leave the pages as they are, splotched and imperfect, because on every single ink-stained page, he remains. Comforter, rock, shepherd, God. He remains the God who grieved. He remains the God who understands. He remains the God who comforts. He remains, and he is enough. So we keep feeling, we keep sketching out these life pages, confident that he knows our stories, he loves our stories, he redeems our stories. And we keep trusting that in the end, our stories are actually a part of his story, and he's really good with words. Number 8, hope and despair can coexist in this space. Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann has written extensively on prophetic hope, even in the midst of legitimate despair. He writes, hope expressed without knowledge of and participation in grief is likely to be false hope that does not reach despair. Thus, it is precisely those who know death most painfully who can speak hope most vigorously. Now, I don't do this in the book, but I'm going to repeat that quote because it's so powerful. Brueggemann writes, hope expressed without knowledge of and participation in grief is likely to be false hope that does not reach despair. Thus, it is precisely those who know death most painfully who can speak hope most vigorously. Despair seems to be the crusty soil from which hope itself is born. We need this reminder. We need to remember that true hope is not just optimism. True hope is not a flimsy, fluffy thing. No. True hope, biblical hope, sees it all. It sees the bad, the hard, the pain. It sees the depths and the darkness. It sees the world's sin and my own sin, and it keeps on seeing all the way to Christ. In the end, deep hope must be securely grounded in the character and love of God. Number 9, while loss is personal, it's not novel. Many faithful believers have walked hard roads before us, and many will after us. On its face, that is not good news, but it is. We can borrow from their hard-earned wisdom and experience, and we must. The prayers recorded for us in the Psalms are immensely helpful in linking us with those who've suffered and lost and remained faithful before us. The Psalms will never help us become super Christians, but they will help us live as human Christians, faithful to God, even in the pain. Number 10, grief can be a gift. Grief is a gift that the church needs to learn to deal with. Grief has the potential to refocus us on the eternal if we'll let it. Grief and loss guard us against the temptation to degrade heaven into a distant and entirely non-applicable theory instead of the life-altering reality that it is. Larry Crabb writes, "When hints of sadness creep into our soul, we must not flee into happy or distracting thoughts. Pondering sadness until it becomes overwhelming can lead us to a deep change in the direction of our being, from self-preservation to grateful worship." Grief can be an oxygenating reminder of eternity. Grief is often the mechanism for drawing our hearts and souls back to God and the eternal intimacy that He has promised. Through it all, Jesus remains. Man of sorrows, giver of the comforter, holy. He is still preparing a place for us. And if He's still preparing a place for us, then we know He's still planning to usher us in one day to paradise. The future remains brighter than the past, more glorious, and more real. Indeed, as Dallas Willard was fond of saying, we live in the now and not yet kingdom. And in this time and in this space, it is right to mourn. It is normal to feel the pain. It is holy to burn for justice. It is also good that we remember He is coming back. Amen. Come, Lord Jesus. That's it for that chapter. I hope that you find something in there that might be helpful for you, whether you're in a season of grief or maybe you're walking with someone who's in a season of grief. Find one or two of those points that might be helpful for you. I really believe in my soul that grief can be that oxygenating reminder. Now, some of those things are good for us to remember, but they're not great for us to sort of beat someone over the head with, especially when they're grieving. Tim Keller, in his book, Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering, talks some about how some of these truths are so good for us to hold on to, but they're not good for us to preach at somebody who's in the hospital. And that can be just cruel. So we have to have that balance where we're holding these truths, but not necessarily hitting other people with them. I'll put some links in the show notes to some other articles and chapters that I've written on grief. So check those out if that resonates. There were some hints to some of those other writings in this chapter, but all in all, that's sort of a boiling down of some of the main ideas that I have found helpful in my own grief journey and with the people that I've walked with who are walking through pain and specifically grief and loss, whether that's missionaries overseas or folks local, whether it's COVID loss or whether it's just life and the different things that happen here that hurt and they leave their mark. So I will also mention a book, Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy by Mark Vroegop. I'll put it in the show notes. It is a book specifically on lament, but lament is something that can be very helpful for the Christian, especially when it comes to grief and loss. It's a way, lament is sort of a way that we keep grieving with God instead of needing to pull ourselves away or isolate ourselves from God. The Psalms, of course, show us that it is not required that we isolate from God when we're experiencing big emotions, whether that's anger or grief that looks like grief. Sometimes grief looks like anger. Sometimes grief looks like grief. There's the saying that I sat with my anger long enough until she told me her real name was grief. So that is sometimes the case as well. So anyway, I'll share that in the show notes as well. Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy, with some links to some other articles. And just a reminder, if you have thoughts or questions about this or anything else that you would like addressed in a future episode of Digging in the Dirt, please click the link in the show notes. There's a Google form. You can leave a comment or leave a request to discuss a specific topic that you might be interested in, or that you feel like I haven't addressed yet or haven't addressed well. So maybe I can clarify that. I guess that's it. So may God's favor be with you, and my prayers are with you as you go with God. Okay, see ya.